I'm really excited to welcome you to this panel today on global hip-hop and social change with four of the most important and urgent voices in hip-hop today. George Sen-One Morillo has been a legend in the graffiti scene in New York City since the 80s. By 1982, he was painting subway trains on the One Line. He became a member of one of the most revered crews in hip-hop history, the Incredible Bombing Masters, IBM. He currently teaches graffiti art classes and produces fine art installations. Jasiri X is an MC and community activist from Pittsburgh. He's a creative force behind the acclaimed internet news series This Week with Jasiri X, and is also a founding member of the anti-violence group One Hood. His video, What If the Tea Party Was Black, went viral, and his debut album, American History X, was named Album of the Year at the Pittsburgh Hip Hop Awards. Invincible is an MC and activist from Detroit who is also a member of the all-female collective Anomalies. In 2008, she released her debut album, Shapeshifters. She started her own label, Emergence Music, using cooperative economics to build her label. She works with Detroit Summer's Live Arts Media Project and the Detroit Future Youth Network. Immortal Technique is a rapper. He's from Harlem. That's how we wanted to be introduced. So I want to open up with a question for all the panelists to address, which is a very general question about, as artists, how you see your role in society and why do you do what you do?
All right, getting to the answers to this question. As an artist, I guess as a human being, we have a role. When we see something wrong, is to fix it. Artist just has a tool that maybe other people haven't developed yet, and they have their own tools. So as me as an artist that does, that use my hands to paint, whatever category it should be put in, I have to use what I have to do what I do. I came up when hip hop was not even really hip hop yet. And so for me, it means something really different than today's generation. So I have no choice to do what I do. I've seen a whole generation get wiped out for trying to solve our own problems. And for doing that, we end up leaving a gift for the world, which is hip hop now. So I have a responsibility, not just for myself and not just for the people in this room or the people that I come in contact with or the people suffering, but also to continue a legacy of a lot of people that lost their lives in order for this culture to be where it is today. And these people are never, ever recognized. It's almost just like the Black Panther Party losing their having political prisoners in prison and having exiles and having Panthers that were executed and nobody ever knowing this, getting lost in history. And that's what's happening with hip hop. The early soldiers that put it down and the people in the groups that did put it down have been totally erased out of history. You'll see them in books, but you won't know who they are. You'll see their pictures being exploited in videos and old school movies and all kinds of stuff. But these people are never, ever spoken to. And the ones that are around are like really in bad situation, bad conditions, and they dying horrible. So for me, as an artist, and who gained skills from a movement that was to better ourselves, and I got it from other kids who taught me, I understand the legacy was to continue and never to stop. So pretty much today, as an adult, 43 years old, I still do graph, but I do a lot of the fine arts, I do logos, I do fashion industry, all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, I utilize what I have, even to break in the mainstream, to promote political prisoners, to promote the old school, to promote these people that are not in existence. So for me, my role in society today is to continue the history aspect and also to be as fully involved in any movement that has the youth involved or the masses of people involved and just try to contribute what I have. So that's basically the answer to that question.
Oh, yeah, I would say I kind of will see my role as like what you would say maybe a change agent or really like an agent for like liberation. I mean, I look at, you know, when you say in society, I mean, we're in a society that's really, really messed up. You know, when we in one of the most unjust, unequal societies. And so to be in this society and to, you know, be from a community and see the condition of our people, the suffering of our people, the pain, the anguish of our people, I feel like as an artist, I have to speak to that and speak out for that and really I feel like, if you're somebody of consciousness, regardless of what, title you give yourself or what job you have, it's like, liberator should be in front of that, you know what I'm saying? Because, the reality is we're oppressed. And we've been talking about freedom, justice, and equality, but we haven't received it. So I feel like, I have to I have a responsibility, not only to the elders that came before me to sacrifice their life so I can have it better, but for myself and my children coming behind me to make this a more equal place, a more just place by whatever means that takes. And so for me to get on the microphone and speak and not speak critically about, these issues that many of us are dealing with and the suffering and condition of our people that's getting worse every day, I just think that would be, shirking my responsibility. So, that's how I look at it. I look at it as, I have to be somebody that, as my art has to be about, the liberation of our people, the betterment of our people, and the freedom and justice for our people. So that's what I strive to do.
First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you here. I appreciate everybody coming through. I think that as an artist, especially a hip-hop artist, I have to recognize that the art that I do is not just a reflection of what society is, but it also enables people to reinforce stereotypes or to question them. And I think one of the most important things as a revolutionary artist is not to get people to believe everything you say, but rather to get them to question everything that they are told. I think this is an incredibly important thing. One of the things that dawned on me coming into this conference and coming into conferences like this is that the large difference in between a free man and a slave is that a slave is afraid to ask questions, and a free man knows that it's his right, inalienable, to question the government, to question the power structure that decides how they will live and exist and under what conditions they will. I can do this in terms of business, in terms of music. As an artist, I think that that's a responsibility to some extent. There are people that are artists that have no responsibility like that, and they just take it as entertainment. And I think that's where I would differ from what people see as an artist. I like to consider myself a revolutionary in training. I do things outside of music, things that have nothing to do with going into the studio and recording a song, because that to me is only the entry level of what it means to be a revolutionary artist. At some point, you have to decide whether you're gonna take the bag of ammunition or the bag of medical supplies off that beach in Cuba and what kind of fight you're gonna have. And that's just the bottom line. That's how I see it. Thank you.
Let's see. I want to start out with a quote from Grace Lee Boggs, who is a 96-year-old philosopher and activist from Detroit, also happens to be a friend and mentor to me. And she said, "Creativity is the key to unlock human liberation." And that's the value that guides my work as an artist and an activist. And like all of these other panelists up here, these incredible artists and activists, I do both of those things. I both make art, make music, but I also do community organizing in very concrete ways. And often there's points where you feel like you have to choose between those two aspects of who you are. And I feel like my role in doing both is to figure out how to make them completely interconnected and integrated into one another so they consistently feed one another. And along those lines, I believe that everybody is an artist. Not just those of us who are on a stage performing, not just those of us who are painting the walls, but everybody's an artist in the sense that that creativity to unlock human liberation that Grace spoke about is what we all are required to have in order to change these immense crises in our lives and view them as opportunities for something other than what the current reality is. And we have an ability through creativity, through art, and through artistic ways of living our lives and creating community with one another to actually make the impossible possible. The ways that I approach that in my work is threefold. First of all, advocate and educate. So, for example, I have a song called Locusts that I worked on with an artist named Fernandes in Detroit, where we highlighted the issues of gentrification and unsustainable development in our city by first interviewing dozens of community members and people in our families and our lives to ask them about the problem, but also their visions. And we integrated the stories they told us into our lyrics, and then we went back and we interviewed them once again, and we integrated that into a docu-music video that showed both our perspective, their perspective, and then that video, that docu-music video, is a tool that ever since we released that piece, Locusts, has been a way to raise awareness and start conversations and be able to actually advocate for change and pushing for community-led development in our city. The second way I feel I approach it is to heal and to energize. You know, those of us who do this type of work, it's very traumatizing. It's a lot of trauma that we are constantly working within in our communities and working to change, and we internalize that. And I feel that it's a need for, as a musician, for me to make music that is healing. I have a song called Keep Going. Every time I perform it, I freestyle off the words that the audience gives me when they feel like they're ready to give up and when they are at the point of burnout. Just give me one word that keeps you going. That's what I tell the crowd, and then I put it into my rhymes, and we all chant, keep going. And that's like one way that I've been able to feel like I'm energizing myself every time I perform, and hopefully the crowd feels that way after the show as well. But, you know, Stevie Wonder, Don't You Worry About a Thing, like that song always comes to mind whenever I think about something hard that's going on in my life. And I feel like most people have that piece of art or work that like heals and energizes them. And as artists, I feel like our role is not just to create music that will be healing for other people, but also facilitate them healing of themselves, like inspire someone else to tell their story as a release, as an expression, as a transformation. And then the third way, and probably the most important, is to transform, organize, and metamorphosize. So that to me is about having a holistic process of creativity that integrates a whole community and collaboration and creating a whole new type of environment and world. The work that I do in Detroit with Detroit Summer Live Arts Media Project, and currently I'm the coordinator of Detroit Future Youth. It's a citywide network of youth social justice and media organizations in the city. Through that, I feel like I transform, organize, metamorphosize, and everything just blends together. It blurs the line between who is an artist, who is an activist. We collaborate on both asking the questions around what the issues are, what the root of the issues are in our communities, and then envisioning the impossible, seemingly impossible solutions, and then creating art, creating music, creating media, creating any kind of expression that will then spark that imagination to go somewhere else than where it's already been. It's an Einstein quote that Grace always mentions: the splitting of the atom changed everything but the human mind, and thus we drift towards catastrophe. And she also said, or often quotes him as saying, imagination is more important than education and knowledge. And the fact that most of us have really stifled our ability to imagine a different way of living means that we get stuck in this so-called inevitable reality of how unjust the world is. Just to give one quick example of how that transformation happens, just this morning, it came out that 180 students were suspended at Western International High School in Detroit because they staged a walkout yesterday to protest the closing of another high school in their neighborhood, Southwestern High School, one of dozens of schools that's being closed this year, hundreds that have been closed over the last few years in our city. Through Detroit Future Youth Network, the network that I coordinate, I was able to reach out to several artists in our community who were able to work with the students to make a piece of media, a video that told their story of why they were walking out. We were able to get people to come out and document what was happening and advocate for them when they were being suspended and arrested. And then currently, now that the students are suspended, they've considered the opportunity that their suspension for the next couple of weeks could then be a freedom school where they continue to meet up, get their homework done, but more importantly, be able to critically continue to think about these issues and create different projects that express the possibilities of what's next. And I feel like that's really what this is all about, is about not just critiquing the way that the current realities are, but really beginning to imagine another possibility. And I feel like that's what my role is as an artist and activist.
Thank you, everyone. So all of you have collaborated with artists outside the US. Invincible's worked with the Palestinian group Dam, and Immortal Technique with the British Iraqi rapper Loki, among others. Why do you think that hip-hop has become so global? Why has hip-hop become the beat of resistance for young Palestinians, Tunisians, French immigrants, and so many others around the world? I thought that Invincible might want to start us out with this, and then everybody else can also jump in.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say, like, that for me, hip-hop is how I learned English, as I said in the video, and really shaped not just how I speak, but also what stories I was able to be exposed to, like what frames of reference I was able to be shaped by that weren't going to be taught elsewhere. And I feel like all over the world you see a lot of people who are not just learning English through listening to hip-hop, but they're learning those frames of reference, and they're learning those stories of struggles. And it's kind of like the concept of the message in a bottle. Like, all these communities that are in similar conditions all over the world are then able to use this bottle or this container of hip-hop to express that and send that across, international waters to really convey those stories and feel that interconnectedness of all of our movements. Particularly with the group Dem, who I've been able to collaborate and perform with on several occasions. I'm deeply inspired by the work that they do and the whole Palestinian hip-hop movement. If you haven't seen the film Slingshot Hip Hop, definitely check that out. Filmed by Jackie Saloom, who's a filmmaker from the Detroit area, Palestinian filmmaker. And I was able to support her with the making of that film, and through that I was exposed to just the incredible hip-hop movement out of Palestine and all the work that they're doing out there to tell the stories that aren't going to be told elsewhere. And I feel like at the point where I first heard them, I was almost giving up on hip-hop. Like, I felt like there was no hope left for people to, except for very small pockets, to really use hip-hop as that tool of resistance by telling those untold stories. And then I saw how the Palestinian hip-hop community felt like that was like not even an option for them to not use it that way. And that really re-inspired me to reapproach music without having like a sense of shame or a sense of like you're being overly political when you rhyme. Sometimes you kind of get put in a pigeonhole as being a political artist, and you feel like you're not going to be able to reach who you need to reach by being outspoken. For me, I do like to slip the message in, like slip the medicine in, I guess you could say, and always music comes first and like the art form comes first, but it's like inseparable from the stories that I need to get across. And so I feel like the whole movement that's out there in Palestine, in the Middle East, in North Africa, particularly, is doing that, has been doing that. As part of like the whole Arab Spring movement, there was a lot of hip hop artists that were able to convey what was going on through their songs, etc. And then just through traveling the world, I think particularly the women in hip hop movement internationally has been really inspiring to me. Like touring, Europe, meeting artists all over that region. There's an artist named Ana Tijoux that I've worked with from Chile, who's incredible, and actually is the daughter of a Chilean revolutionary that was exiled from there, and was very influenced by that struggle. And her lyrics just released a new single actually called Shock, about the shock doctrine and how that's impacting the Chilean community and the student movement out there. So it's just endlessly inspiring to see how people don't feel constrained by what we're supposedly as hip hop artists allowed to speak on or not speak on. So I'll just say like their fearlessness is what has inspired me more than anything.
Yeah, I think too, one of the things that one of the reasons hip hop has become global, I think now, the technology, you can, when you put something on, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, it doesn't just go to like people in the United States. You put something out there and it really is something that people all over the country and the world can access. I saw that when I did a video called I Am Troy Davis about the Troy Davis issue, and realized that was something that the whole world was watching when we actually saw, it was posted in Israel, it was posted in, Italy, Japan, China, and also I think too, I think that, you know, the essence of hip hop. I mean, I think a lot of times when people think about hip hop or rap music now, they think of like the mainstream, you know, rap music, and they think about like what's being played on Hot 97 and MTV. But when you really go back to the origins of hip hop, I mean, you're talking about, you know, a music and an art form that really was able to kind of bring together the gangs in New York City and give people an outlet, man, to able to work out differences, to be able to, you know, express themselves in ways that didn't necessarily have to do with fighting or hurting one another, but expressing themselves, and really gave a voice to people that were really in a condition, a bad condition, suffering condition. It gave them not only a way to like have fun and party and celebrate peacefully, but also it gave them a voice to begin to speak about issues that affected their community when, you know, you wouldn't hear that on ABC or CBS or NBC. And so I think globally that's what you see these hip hop artists are doing. You know, oftentimes you find that the country, the media, the country themselves, a lot of times are, you know, ones that won't allow maybe those voices to be heard. And so I think what you're seeing is that same spirit and energy of the origin of hip hop being expressed globally. But I definitely think that, you know, technology is making it easier for us to connect. I mean, I had connected with producers and artists. I just did a song with an artist in Norway, and you know, I've never been to Norway. I know Tech just came back, you know what I'm saying? You know, just somebody hit me up online. I'm a fan of yours. Here's the beat, and boom, we can connect. And it's really, you know, making it. What I think is the most unique part about it is we're able to see the similarity and the universality of our struggle. And then as an artist in the United States, it causes me not to just think about, oh, this is just going on in my hood or my block or my community, man. These issues that we're dealing with, you know, inequality, injustice, unemployment, poverty, it's happening all over the earth. And oftentimes in these other countries, they're experiencing a much, much worse form of oppression than we are. And so it really enables us as an artist to connect and then kind of grow, you know, to develop a much more wider and stronger voice.
I think that for me, hip-hop may have started in the Bronx. Hip-hop may have started decades ago, but I think now when people look at it, especially around the world, like the brother said, people identify with different aspects of the struggle, and not just the struggle as in a revolutionary struggle, also an economic struggle. They're willing to look at both sides of it. You have people that are dirt poor, that are mesmerized, and I mean that in the fashion of Antoine Mesmer, as in believing in something that doesn't exist, mesmerized by this idea that there's a fantasy land out there where all the women are beautiful and they all want to talk to you because you're that special guy who's dumping out liquor on the floor of a club, or you know, because you drive a fast car that no one can name, or you know, probably feed everyone in your village. But people, whether you know it or not, especially young people, buy into this fantasy. So I mean, hip hop has no religion. It may have been black music in the very beginning, or it was, but now it belongs to the world. You find people from all corners of this planet that say, no, you know what, to me, this is what I believe hip-hop is. And the way I've always seen it is if you have heart and soul, then you can be a part of hip-hop. If you don't have any of those things, and if you're just there to get money, I always tell young people, please go to college and become a lawyer, because you have a better chance of doing that and passing the LSATs than you ever will of having a top 40 hit. If you're here for the girls, you're in the wrong business, player. What you need to do is learn Spanish and start singing some bachata or some salsa, because believe me, now I'm telling people that's just what it is. The largest shows that I've been a part of have been in Colombia and Venezuela, and it was eye-opening to me to see that myself as an underground artist that never, you know, I never sold a platinum record, although I was very successful in terms of independent music. But, you know, having sold a little more than 250,000 units independently, I could be in a crowd of 70,000 people, and the majority of them knew what the lyrics were to the music. That kind of baffled me, to see that there are people out there who, as much as the new mainstream is fed to them, they still cling very much so to the school of a KRS-One, to the school of a Rakim, to Tupac. I mean, they're very attracted to that imagery, to that classic imagery, so much more so than I would say the youth of today here in America, which is sad, because if you see that distinction between, let's say, a rock and roll and a reggae, they know who their pioneers are. They revere them, as opposed to hip hop, where you hear, not all young people, because I know a lot of young people who understand the code of the streets and understand the fact that they'll be old someday themselves. But you know, when you hear a lot of the language, oh man, that's the old nigga from the 80s. Hold on, homie. You be lucky to make it to 40. You be lucky to still have a job and still have people know who you are at that age, because you may just be a page on a blog that doesn't exist anymore in 15 years.
True.
So I think there's something said to be about the longevity of that, and no pun intended, the immortality of a hip-hop artist, which is what people who live in a society that the country has been changed hands like 10 times. Here we go from Republicans to Democrats, which is basically the same thing, only under a different corporate shell. But in other countries, when one party comes in, that's it. Everyone who was here is out, and you might be out the country. You better pack your bags and get the hell on out, because no one wanted you here. And, you know, that's the type of reality that they have. When you talk about gun violence, a young child in West Africa has seen more gun violence than any child that grows up in Harlem today will ever see, you know what I mean? Or I should say the large majority of them. And I think that's what also attracts people to it too, the violent aspect of it all, you know what I mean? And of course the sexism, which we'll get to at another point in this. But I think that that's definitely something that brings people in, but also that makes them forcibly part of a larger conversation, to say, this is how this part of this relates to me. Or you want to talk about gentrification and people, you know, building a $1 million condominium in Harlem. I'm sure some child in the Sudan could tell you more about gentrification. Or someone whose land is now the Tel Aviv airport in Palestine can tell you about gentrification. So I think they relate to those subjects on a whole nother level, which is what makes it a little bit more personal, I would say, for them.
I come off more like what they doing is incredible. I mean, I'm involved in the art, the visual art aspect of it, and it's worldwide. IBM is worldwide. If you guys don't see, graffiti is so big worldwide, way bigger than it is here. And the industry is just like the music industry took over. Now you got billion-dollar companies popping up, making the product for writers, making spray paint and all kinds of stuff. But get into it on a historical aspect. I'm gonna give you guys a little history from 30 years back, when I was about 13 years old. Hip hop began to explode. There was a dead period in the 70s when hip hop began to, like, the early version of hip hop, from the graph to the break dances, MCing, which was basically accommodating a lot of the DJing at the time. The DJs were really like the celebrities when we used to go to jams. And MCs were masters of ceremonies. They pretty much kept the crowd going. It developed out of the disco era and some of the radio celebrities. A lot of that influenced a lot of that. But anyway, get into this whole concept of it being worldwide. For me, it's only the natural progression for it. Because when it was created, and the misconception of it, it wasn't one isolated group. Hip hop came up from everybody from one class, but it was a mixture of people, of every type of group. I grew up in the Upper West Side, which was the urban development. It was considered Lower Harlem, 93rd Street, Columbus Avenue. And we was a mix of people that had just been thrown together. I mean, we had ex-young lords from Spanish Harlem that got relocated because they began, I grew up in a tenement, and I relate to what Immortal Technique is talking about. Like, the mentality today with our youth is they oppressing, a lot of it is them oppressing themselves. Because the way I grew up, I'll take any project today in any hood compared to the way I grew up in a tenement. I mean, in a tenement in my days, you was at the lowest. There was no heat at no time. There was no hot water at no time. You dealt with lead poisoning. I mean, look at the stats in the 70s. It was horrible to live in New York. Everything was burnt down. These brownstones that you see that worth millions everywhere throughout the city, from the Lower East Side all the way up, were abandoned, burned down. Nobody wanted them. The city was giving them away for $1, and people didn't want them. You know what I mean? That's how bad it was in the city. It was horrible. And the hip-hop condition, the reason hip-hop became what it did at the time, because it solved all our problems, because of the situation we was in. And we as a class of people had that relationship with each other. Whether it was in the Bronx, whether it was Up West Side, Lower East Side, Brooklyn, wherever it was, we had the connection that we lived the same, that we could relate to what we said to each other. So if an MC came out and told his story, people could really take it. They could really feel it. If a graph artist threw up something on the wall that said, F the police or F Koch, dumb Koch, you could relate to that. You know what I mean? And that's the way we vocalize. Graffiti, you gotta understand, was the first and the oldest element in hip hop. Before hip hop was anything. I had the privilege of being born in '68, but having an older brother who's 8 years older than me, and he's one of the founders of Zoo York. Zoo York was, before hip-hop was hip-hop. It was graffiti and skateboarding in the city. A lot of people don't even know New York's role in skateboarding history. New York had evolved skateboarding into street skateboarding. It came from California, and it was all swimming pools and the suburbs. New York brought it into the urban setting and started making tricks out of it. And then it went back and forth for a period. So we had a dead period in the 70s. In the early 80s, there was a big boom. A lot of, like my generation, came up after my brother, and certain people that came with me here played a major role in it, and they in the audience. But what happened was there was a new resurgence, there was a new energy, there was a youth energy, and graffiti began to take a different turn in style. It took colors, it changed tremendously. So did breakdancing, and so did the rap game, so did the DJing. Everything began to move forward at a real fast speed where we began to get exposure that the 70s didn't get. And then what happened was a lot of us began to travel and make money. This is in the early 80s. I mean, my brother went all throughout Europe in 1984, breakdancing and getting paid for it, places where they never even seen it. I got friends in the audience that have been to Japan in '84, introduced Japanese people to breakdancing and to hip hop with Rocksteady Crew, you know what I mean? And so this what we're seeing today it happened already. We blew up. Dondi blew up, was doing galleries all around the world. I mean, we have seen this success. We have Norm Ski from Flashdance in the first Burger King commercial, or is it McDonald's? McDonald's commercial with Stacey Dash when he's only like 14 years old. And this is all off of hip hop, early. A lot of people don't remember that part of the history because it was erased, And the thing is that hip hop came from a class of people. It wasn't necessarily a race. Certain elements, yes, was dominated by certain boroughs and groups, but it was overall, it was a universal thing. And to bring back to that point, look at Zulu Nation, for instance. It used to be the Black Spades. Zulu Nation became Zulu Nation, but what went in front of it? Universal Zulu Nation. Because at the time, Zulu Nation already understood that this was a universal culture. You understand? And the world began to adapt it. What we're seeing today is now a resurgence of this, because now the conditions around the world is similar to when hip-hop started, if not worse, in these communities. You understand? So people around the world are going to relate to what's pure hip-hop versus what people are not in those conditions are going to relate to. You understand? The culture could reach everybody, but it has to come from where you at in your life and in the world in order for it to become your salvation. But hip-hop was developed to solve all our problems originally. We didn't need nobody. We didn't need to ask nobody for jobs. We didn't pay taxes. We didn't call police. We dealt with everything amongst ourselves. Hip hop provided the code of how you're supposed to behave, which is out the window now. I mean, come on, listen to the lyrics today. I mean, we would have heard that when we was younger. They would have got jumped. They would have got round out of town. New York wouldn't have went for that. Hip hop was ours. We treasured it. If you went out of the line of hip hop, you got beat up. As a writer, if you violated, the principles, you was ousted of your community, and if you got caught by anybody, you was getting hurt. Graffiti writers, we had to respect each other's names. You had to be original, creative, and you had to imagine the impossible and make it happen. And as young kids, we was able to do that. At 12, 13 years old, I went into a tunnel that a train was 10 times my size, and it was so intimidating. But you know what? After we conquered that, it went on to everything from bridges to climbing sides of buildings to doing things you couldn't even imagine at 12, 13 years old. You know what I mean? So what I see now with the universe, with the international world embracing hip-hop in its purest form, to me is awesome, because I think that's what we need here, back here in America. I think it needs to make a full circle, deal with the international circle, because they're the ones right now being totally bombed. We getting it here, but not to the degree they are over there. And I think once it makes that circle, a lot of those people are gonna come back here, and I think we're gonna have real hip hop in New York again, besides the panelists.
It seems like one of the things that people are pointing out is that global hip-hop has been a two-way dialogue, from the time of Zulu Nation till today, where artists here can produce music that's heard all over the world, and that somebody in Cuba or somebody in Tunisia can upload a video to YouTube, and that can be seen around the world as well. And so I think, as Jasiri X was saying, technology has really introduced this very interesting dynamic where the music there can be this real kind of two-way dialogue. I want to shift the discussion a little bit to something that's been brought up by a few people, which is mainstream hip-hop culture, and to think about the role of corporations in hip-hop. Also want to ask about the sexism and misogyny that we find in a lot of corporate rap. And I'm thinking, as somebody who has been a pioneer in hip-hop since the early days, maybe Sen-One could start us off with that question, and then others chime in too.
Okay. So the question again? I'm sorry.
There's a lot of parts of that question. But
the corporation aspect.
The role of the corporations in
okay.
hip-hop and mainstream hip-hop, and then sexism.
Okay, and then the sexism. Well, the corporation, we all know, come on, the powers that be, that 1% is really behind these corporations. And the reason they're behind this culture is for many reasons. When we got hit, we got hit with crack epidemic and an AIDS epidemic, which basically wiped out almost everybody I know. You know what I mean? There's not a friend of mine that I can't bring in front of you that hasn't lost family members or lived through that epidemic. The epidemic in this city was the night of the living dead, literally. To watch, from one day to the next, just imagine you being only 2 people in this room that's not addicted to a drug that made you look like a monster. That's the way the streets were, you know what I mean? And what it did, it wiped out a very powerful generation. A generation that comes out of the civil rights movement that was also fatherless to a big extent. And being fatherless, although it sounds terrible, and me being a father now, sometimes it's not so bad, because I think in some degrees people have to go through struggle and heart and pain in order to understand other people's pain. A lot of people take other people's pain for granted, and because they haven't experienced it. And when you do experience something like an epidemic that wipes out so many people and takes your whole neighborhood away. I watched my whole neighborhood be gentrified and wiped out. It's like it never existed, and that's crazy, you know what I mean? And so corporate America, to watch how they come in, and it's basically taking a tool that we were so proud about, that was our salvation, and watching it being used against us. And a lot of the stuff that's going on with the sexism, we were just like the civil rights movement. We wasn't perfect. But there was a lot of things that, as young kids, we was trying to change without guidance. And now I come back to look and say, wow, we were so advanced. Hip-hop was flooded with females. Again, that's being left out of the equation. You know what I mean? I would sit at home writing graph, and there'd be 5 or 6 girls there, right? Shortcake, little lady, a baby doll. I come up with millions of names. We had dancers, double destinies, 2 twins. The female influence in hip-hop early was right there. So a lot of it began to change when like I spoke earlier about that whole early 80s explosion in which the world started coming in and money started coming in. And I was more of the last generation. I'm considered the last generation of the trains. I come in through the period of time when the trains was taken out from us. It was a full-wedged war with the city. Watch Star Wars, watch all those documentaries, you see how Koch, it was public enemy #1 to be a graph artist. They were putting razor fences and the yards, dogs, wolves at one time, electrocuting the fences. And this is to deal with 12, 13-year-olds, you know what I mean? So this is, and it's out there, it's documented if you look for it. So we went on through hard times, but a lot of the change came about being after the industry, really kind of like from the 90s, kind of like, I say around NWA's period. I think that's when you're seeing the rap game become very vulgar. Because New York, we did our thing, but we wasn't as vulgar. Rakim was really proud about saying that he did like 2 albums with only 2 curses. And he used to say, having a curse, what was it? That you didn't have nothing intelligent to say. if you had to curse. You didn't have a word that could replace that curse with something intelligent. So we was a generation of wanting to be smarter and better. You know what I mean? So when the industry got it, I was in the music industry in the 90s. So I knew, and I actually entered the music business trying to escape the streets because I was involved heavily in the streets. I grew up in street gangs and the whole thing. So in that period of time, I was having my first son, and I thought the music business was going to be an escape. I was in Sony, I was road managing a group, and I was really deep involved. And I had to step back from the music business because it was worse than the streets. It was very corrupted. With Tommy Mottola, it was all mob controlled. You had to go everywhere with a pistol. I was a road manager, but I was more of the strong arm. So I was strapped everywhere I went. But that's the industry in the 90s. You couldn't go to one show and not see Redman or somebody had to pull out and shoot up in the air. I mean, this was always. And what happened was the industry really played us. They played us. And the music began to curve. And it began to take this curve where it never came back from. And that's where we at today. The materialism, the sexism, the genocide lyrics that you hear about killing ourselves and doing the stuff that's being said now. I mean, I can't even tell you the artist that's out today because I can't even hear it. Because it's like, for me, it's like stepping, not even back in time, because we was never at that level. I mean, rap was always intelligent to me. I mean, I grew up with Chuck D. I mean, the message, Flash, And just to give you a history on that music, early on, the music, to show you how it was used for us versus against us now, listen to the message. Listen to White Lines. Flash's Grandmaster, Melly Mel and the Furious Five and Flash was telling you, don't do drugs, don't do crack, don't do white lines, coke. Don't do the coke, because that's what was coming in. Now, what's the lyrics are saying in the mainstream? It's like, go do that shit, go get high, go, and you're telling kids that don't live that lifestyle, they going out there. I lived that lifestyle, and I spent my whole life trying to get out. So I listen to these kids that don't live in the lifestyle, and I'm saying, why the hell you want to jump into that shit? You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make sense, So that's where the industry is today with that, and it's purposely done. It's being used against us.
The way that the corporation sees hip-hop, rap music, however you choose to define it for yourself, it's just a business to them. It's like any other form of entertainment. It has a formula. If anybody is involved in the fashion world, or you ever wanted to be, for all the ladies that are out there, if you ever wanted to be a dancer and you danced in ballerina, they take you at a certain weight. You know what I mean? You want to be a part of and dance at Lincoln Center. They say, if you're above this weight, you're not going to make it, sweetheart. It's the same discussion that I've seen them have with women before. Look, if you want to be put on a major label, then you're going to have to dress in this way. And they tell brothers too, you're going to have to, lose some pounds. We're going to have to sex you up a little bit to make you. I mean, that's what they're trying to sell people. An illusion, a dream, It has no basic reality. And I remember in the past, because since we bring up the good old days, you got props for being real. Now it's just about who could be the biggest fraud in the game, and it totally doesn't matter. There's no accountability for what you say. You can make death threats. You can talk about somebody else's kids, somebody else's mother. You hide behind 15 bodyguards. You live in another city. I'm never gonna see you. You can talk to me on Twitter all day. I hate you. I hope you die. I mean, that's the social responsibility that stands behind it. I mean, what created hip hop and allowed it to be in this fashion? Some people say a lack of direction. Now, this is where me and some of the older generation have differed. It is my contention, and I'll repeat this anywhere, that I believe the civil rights generation dropped the ball with hip-hop. I dare say they turned their back on them. And you don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree, but my posing of the question is this. If you got a 19-year-old Ice Cube, an 18-year-old Eazy-E, how do you teach a child like that? With hatred? By telling them they're a disgrace to the race and steamrolling their CDs? Or do you stop a child who's 18 and say, hey, young brother, let me have a conversation with you? I've done a prison program or two in my day. And believe me, the way you get through them is not by acting like you tougher than them. You show them, yes, I am you. I used to be in that exact situation. I'll remember my number forever until the day that I die. That has nothing to do with it. What we have to do is to have that conversation about what goes on after it. You know what I mean? When I have that conversation with young people that are really living a street life, I tell them, okay, brother, well then let's do the math. And let's say you hustle real hard for a year, you manage to save up, $200,000-$300,000. What you gonna do with the money? You're gonna have to wash it somehow because Uncle Sam gonna want his cut. You're gonna buy a car, it's gonna be worth half of what it was when you get off the lot. Jewelry is a horrible investment, young brother. It only has a 20% resale value. Let's talk numbers. I thought you was a hustler, my man. What's good, yo? Let's get Harlem on it, But this is what I'm talking about. The industry never dealt with reality. It always wanted to preclude that reality with the fantasy. Almost the way a person would insult you, and then when everyone realizes that they're an asshole for making that joke, they're like, oh, well, I was just kidding. This is all fun and games to show the most negative stereotype of someone else. And I'm not saying that in the old school people had perfect lyrics or that, they were the model citizen either, but everybody seemed to know their lessons. They seemed to understand where they came from, and they had knowledge of self, and I think that was the big difference. Nowadays, I don't think we're out of line for saying that hip-hop can sometimes, and in many ways, become a caricature of what Black and Latino people are. Not a real thing, If you want to exemplify who we are, then you can't just shove a piece of chicken in your mouth and act like, dancing around is going to get you love over here. I tell people, we had this conversation about even white people using the N-word. And I was saying that, look, I can't stop nobody from saying whatever they feel comfortable saying in the presence of their own people, wherever they are. But I'll tell you this, if you could do that in Mississippi and Alabama, then I have a different approach to you. And if you're going to choose to associate with everything that we are as a people, then at least, be able to tell me who John Henrik Clark is, you know what I mean? And be able to tell me, or have read the Malcolm autobiography. I mean, something that would show me that you at least have some caring in your heart for our people, because you can't love our music without loving our people. You can't love our music and think that we're animals. You can't love our music and live your life by our lyrics and look at us and still have that little thing in your brain like Spike Lee put in where he has the conversation with the Italian brother in the pizzeria, and he says to him, oh, well, those are just niggas. And well, who's your favorite basketball player? He tells him, Michael Jordan, you know what I mean? Where he has all these conversations to him about how his icons are really people of the race that he has all these negative ideas about. When if he just realized that, if you take race out of the equation for a second and you just look at the nuts and bolts of what it is, I think that while there is definitely racism involved, that hip-hop is run more by classism. If you have the money, then you can be a rich black producer that robs and rapes his own artists in the fashion of the white producers that used to do that in the 50s and 60s.
True, so true.
And if we talk about gangsterism, I think that we'll find out that the record industry was based upon that. Yeah. Even the black artists back in the day, you had to be down with the Italian or the Jewish mafia in order to get your money. Why? Because if you are an artist that barely got a right to vote, or if you had no right to vote, we're talking about the 40s and 50s here, and you over there asking a promoter for your money, it's different if you got Avi in them or Louis in them. Then you already know why we here, man. I'm not here to play with you. They're not playing. It's not, 6 brothers with trombones and saxophones. You got dudes there with trench coats in summertime. They're gonna get their money. And that's real, because that's the way that they collect it. So why else would the industry be built on a model that's not pure gangsterism? All right, here's this big pie that we're gonna have 100%, and you're gonna get 10 points, which is 10% of the pie. But all the expenses that we had for your record is gonna be deducted, not out of the gross, but out of the net that you got, which is the 10%. If that's not some gangster shit, I don't know what is. And just to conclude what I have to say, I learned very early in the hip hop business and in all business that a petty criminal and a gangster, they're related, but they're not cut from the same cloth. When you steal something from a store, you're a petty criminal. When you take something from somebody, you're a petty criminal. When you make people take your money, you're a gangster. When you go to someone else's country and say, I don't care who you voted in, little nigga, you're gonna sell me all your oil rights for that amount of money. Take it. Or you want my IMF loan? No, you don't want it? Well, you're gonna take this $50 billion with 20% on top of that anyway. You're gonna take my money. When you are a rap producer and you tell someone, hey man, I'm gonna sign you, here's $25,000 for 6 albums, you're gonna take my money. That's the type of gangsterism you're dealing with. Just understand that it is a form of entertainment to a lot of people, and that's how they see it. Very different from the organic aspect of how we make music and how we choose to relate and express ourselves. Very different from the way underground or independent artists sees a connection with the people that support them, who believe in the music that they make. The way that a corporation basically sees it is, are the numbers there? Yes, fine. It doesn't even matter what the message promotes anymore. I don't care, yo. Are you talking about Black Power? Can you sell more than 500,000 units? Great. You know what I mean? Are you talking about pimping hoes and selling cars? Can you sell more than 500,000 units? Wonderful. That's the bottom line with it. I think that honestly, you know, during the late 90s or mid 90s, they got spooked about the community empowerment, but the bottom line is they're just interested in numbers. That's it. They don't care about our culture. They don't care about us. They don't care if we live or die. You know, if that little boy in the video toting a gun gets his head shot off, they don't care. It's not their responsibility. It's not their fault. It's your fault. That's how they see it.
True. Yeah, it's interesting because that you say it's not just. I was just at South by Southwest, and I was talking to one of the guys who runs a blog, you know, and the blog's called Rap Radar. I was talking to a guy named Elliot Wilson, and I asked him, you know, he was doing this interview about, like, you know, hip hop or whatever, and I said, you know, because this was right around when, you know, we just got news of Trayvon, and so I said, man, are you going to, you know, use your blog to talk about, you know, issues in our community? You know, you have an election coming up that's going to be one of the most racialized, crazy things we've seen. You have, you know, people being killed in our community. Are you going to use your, you know, your blog to talk about that? And he literally turned and looked at me with, like, I mean, like this look, like almost like I was crazy for asking the question. He looked and he said, "That's not my responsibility." You know, and so man, just to kind of co-sign what Immortal Technique has said, it was interesting because, you know, I always say hip hop is corporatized, and being at South by Southwest, you saw American Express and Jay-Z do a big promotion. You saw Mountain Dew and Lil Wayne do a big promotion. Snoop was on the big Doritos stage. Nas and Vivo. I mean, that's basically what you saw, was kind of these corporations really using hip hop artists to promote their products and, you know, make them young and cool and hip and, you know, to sell more stuff. And it's interesting that we kind of talked about the kind of the international piece, because the United States State Department seen the power of hip hop too. And they start grabbing hip-hop groups and sending these hip-hop groups all around the world and kind of promoting this idea. I think the whole point to me and why you have corporate hip-hop or mainstream hip-hop being sexist or misogynistic is that really this is American culture. I mean, it's not, don't just try to just put on hip-hop. You know what I mean? America is birthed out of sexism, misogyny, and ultimately white supremacy, and real specifically, really white male supremacy. You know? So now now what they begin to promote and what they put millions of marketing dollars behind is things that they see through the eye and their lens of white supremacy. And so one of the videos I got is a video called Just a Minstrel. Because what we saw was, you know, rappers today in 2012 really doing the same facial expressions and smiling and bugging their eyes out as they did in like the 20s and 30s. It's like, well, so right, I mean, this is, come on. But what hasn't changed is the power structure of the entertainment industry. So if the power structure hasn't changed, if the mentality of those that run the entertainment industry and are trying to really, really trick you into giving them their money, and like my brother said, sell you an illusion, if that hasn't changed, then the imagery isn't going to change. You know, and they're going to continue selling you this same thing. They just updated. You know, they just updated and bring it into 2012. So it was the twist back then, and then it's Soulja Boy doing the Superman, and whatever else is the new latest dance, and they just repackage it and resell it in that formula. And really, I have a line, and I say dumb rappers need teaching, but they still be the man because dumb fans keep believing. And I think this is where we have to be more intelligent consumers. And I always say that if you don't, you know, if you want to see a change, then you have to support artists and the music that reflects you and what you want to see. Because the reality is, if we all got together and said, man, we support Immortal Technique, we support Invincible, and we sharing, I mean, because we spend a lot of time, sometimes I think too much, being critical about the mainstream. And you know, we want to have like 5-6 hour conversations about Nicki Minaj and the detriment, but don't talk about these brilliant female MCs like Invincible, Star in Atlanta, Rock, that are making these incredible hip-hop music and saying, okay, well, let's stop talking about them. Let's share this. Let's make sure these sisters are known and recognized, and let's email their videos to one another. Let's make sure people are watching them. And I think if we as consumers were more intelligent about what we consume and not really being gangster, because a lot of times that's what we do. We'll say, well, this is what's on the radio, so I'm gonna just listen, you know, and then we'll get even crazy. We'll like hate the song, like I hate this song, but then on listen number 50, and we singing the song and we find ourselves, and you be thinking like, why am I singing this? I hate this song, but we continue to listen to. But how often are we organized in a way where we're challenging stations like Hot 97 or Power, I think was it Power 105, or the stations here, and saying, no, we demand a balance in the music. We want to hear artists like Immortal Technique on this station. We want to hear artists that talk about consciousness. We're tired of hearing the violence that's happening in our community. I remember the last time, and I'll finish with this, the last time I was in New York, and the two songs, number one, I literally thought, I said, did Rick Ross buy Hot 97? Yeah. What is going on? I mean, every other song was Rick Ross. I mean, songs that wasn't even singles. It was like they were just finding, you know, Rick Ross songs to play. And so it was, you know, I'm selling coke right off the iPhone. This is just playing an afternoon, you know. Now, if you sell coke off the, and so I'll be thinking like, you know, because he was a correction officer, I'd be thinking like, do he still have stock in the prison industrial complex? Because if you're selling coke off the iPhone, you're going to prison pretty soon, you know? But you know, a young person will listen to that and try that, and then the other song was Tony Montana, and I'm thinking like, man, like, and we sit here and we're in, you know, a community. Right when I came that same time, it was when that woman was shot and killed protecting her babies in the streets from a shootout. And we sit here, and like I said, we take it, and we act as if we don't have no power to change it. But the power relies on us, you know, and if we start to come together and raise our voice, one of the best things that I heard, we were just in DC occupying the Justice Department in support of Mumia. Happy birthday, Mumia. But when Chuck D took the stage and talked about a conversation that he had with my brother, my mentor, Paradise the Architect of X-Clan, who's right here in the audience, you know what I'm saying? And they're talking about putting their weight behind an initiative to begin to organize to get balance in the music. And if they're not going to play us, then damn it, we need to get together and get our own stations. You know what I'm saying? Pool our resources to support and do for ourselves. To me, this is what's so powerful about the example I saw as a dude with a job in Pittsburgh, seeing Immortal Technique and seeing Invincible, spitting conscious lyrics, traveling all around the country and the world and doing it themselves independently on their own labels. And it gave me the faith to say, man, I can do it too. You know what I'm saying? And so I didn't have to just fall for the trick of MTV and think, oh, I got to get signed or I got to be a part of a major label to be a success. You know what I'm saying? So let's do that, man. Let's stop being fooled by corporations. And I mean, if we're going to have a real movement, let's begin to support those that speak for us,
you know what I'm saying, that say the things that we want to hear, that don't disrespect us and don't abuse us. And let's share those videos and let's make it a movement, a choice. We're going to choose these things that give us life instead of that which gives us death.
I'll just add real briefly, because y'all covered a lot of ground, that for me, as the question was, what's your take on mainstream hip-hop culture and the role of corporations? In a lot of ways, they don't exist in my life, because I live in a parallel universe. In my community where we embody kind of what Jasiri was just speaking about, you basically create your own reality, your own outlets, your own mechanisms to support artists who are not being shown or heard on the mainstream media outlets. You have an expansion of the whole spectrum. It's like how they say you only use what % of your brain, like 2% of your brain, like that 10? It's some way less than 10. But regardless, I mean, that's how people view this music and how people just view the world, period. It's like you just covered your whole side of vision and they're just peeking through your peripheral at this one little slice. And that's, to me, like what the corporatism is. And the rest of it is like this incredible reality. Now, I'm not gonna act like the rest of that reality is perfect either. It's all impacted by capitalism. It's all impacted by what capitalism leads to, which is divisiveness and exploitation of people and humanity, including misogyny is one of the ways that plays out, including, homophobia is part of how that plays out, etc. But I think that, as a result of that, there's still misogyny in independent hip-hop. There's still homophobia in independent hip-hop. There's still all those things that we're speaking about that happen in the corporate realm in our own community. So I just feel like that's the conversation I'm more interested in having personally, is like, how do we actually hold ourselves accountable within our communities, not to be censoring people, not to be punitive about it, but how do we really have transformative conversations that fully embrace our humanity as all of us who are part of our communities, a part of this culture, a part of hip-hop, a part of the artist community, the activist community. How do we embrace our whole selves? And I feel like that's to me a much bigger question than just how to hold corporate hip-hop accountable or corporate co-optation of hip-hop accountable. I believe that the ultimate critique is to live the solution. That's my life motto, and that's what I do, and that's why I feel like in a lot of ways those mainstream outlets are obsolete. Now, I know that they obviously impact and influence my community on a regular basis, but I feel like the most powerful tool I could give to the youth that I work with is not just to give them the critical thinking tools to be able to break down what they're seeing, but to give them the platform and to help facilitate and nurture their creative process to be able to tell their own stories, to be able to talk about the real authentic relationships that they have with one another, with their sisters, with the people in their community that happen to be queer, with the people in their community that happen to be disabled, with whoever is the most impacted in your community, that you have authentic relationships with them. And how can we tell those stories that are not being told in those mainstream outlets? And that's to me that parallel universe. And it's kind of like to get science fiction on y'all for a second. It's just like, to me, when we are fully embodying our so-called impossible realities within our parallel universe, within the communities that we live and work, that's when we can start to really penetrate the reality most people view as viable. And that's how we can start to really transform that, is to actually embody those solutions. So the whole women in hip hop movement, to me, is like Jasiri X said, more important for me to highlight than to sit there and tell you what's wrong with the misrepresentation of women in hip hop. It's like the ultimate critique of it. And there's plenty of artists that I could recommend for y'all if you want to support them. But to me, it's like that's the key right there. That's the key. Do that research, do that homework. Just like we used to have to dig for tapes and make copies of them for one another, and you would go way out your way to that one store that was way far that you would bike, for like 2 hours to get to whatever it is that it took, you know what I'm saying, to get that tape, like you could just sit there and type like 5 more keystrokes and get to way more options than what's right there, and it's possible, and it's something that we can build up. So that's it.
Jasiri X actually does a workshop called How to Succeed in Hip Hop Without Selling Your Soul. Is that possible? And maybe Jasiri can start us off, but hear from you how, can you speak to your experiences in the commercial music industry as independent artists?
Well, I guess, the brief experience I have in the commercial music industry was that, I did a song. I had stopped rapping. I kind of believed that, people didn't want to hear conscious hip hop, so I was basically a full-time, activist, had a job, was an activist in Pittsburgh. But I did a song around the Gina 6 situation. I did a song called Free the Gina 6. And I sent it, to a website that I would listen to music from called allhiphop.com. They put it on their website. And I remember somebody calling me and was like, yo, you got a song on the front page of All Hip Hop. And I was cool. I was like, yo, I made it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? I left work. I left work and went home and, because they had it blocked on the work computer, you know what I'm saying? So, but, somebody sends a song to Michael Baisden, and then the song's being played all over the country. And, at that time, I had, major labels begin to, some people just wanted to buy the song straight out. I didn't feel comfortable making money off of a song that was based on this tragedy that happened to these young brothers. That didn't sit well with me, you know what I'm saying? So I didn't want to sell the song, but when, labels came, and it was interesting because I was kind of in a dilemma as to what to do, and I went to Atlanta, and I actually heard a lecture. Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan actually he spoke to a group of artists, and he was just talking about a lot of times, like, we want the fame, but we lose the fortune. And we, just like Immortal Technique pointed out, we, want to be on MTV or BET, so we signed with a major label, but come to find out that, a lot of these artists end up broke, owing the label money, and you might have achieved fame, but your bank account is strained, you know what I'm saying? And so, after hearing that, I decided, I'm gonna put the music out myself, and I decided to go, it's a harder route, but I decided to go an independent route, you know what I'm saying? So for me, I'm successful. It depends on like what your idea of success is. My idea of success is, I wake up every morning, I'm doing something I love to do. I travel the country, talking about raising people's consciousness, talking about these issues, having conversations like this. I own a home, I own cars, you know what I'm saying? I'm able to pay my bills every month and put a little something to the side. Like, I'm successful, you know what I'm saying? I mean, how many people wake up every day, you want to talk about, hell, waking up every day and forced to go to a job that they hate, because they have, I hope I'm not hurting nobody's feelings, but, I'm sorry if I am, but, and then, and you just getting by. And you gotta go to sleep knowing like, damn, or, it'd be like Sunday night, you like, damn, I had those 2 days off, but I gotta go through a whole nother week of dealing with these folks that I hate, that don't respect me, that don't love me. So to be able to not only do something I love, but to then be able to interact with like-minded individuals and go all over the country and do this thing, I mean, I feel like I am successful, and I feel like I didn't have to, sell out. You know what I'm saying, or sell my soul. I was able to create music that I feel, nobody tells me like, yo, you gotta do this song, I felt I wanted to do a song to address the Trayvon situation. We did the song, we put it out. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have to get nobody's permission, you know what I'm saying? I didn't ask Kanye and Jay-Z if I could use their beat. I just used it, you know what I'm saying? And if it was an issue, then we talk about it afterwards, you know what I mean? But I mean, so to me, that's success for me. And the wild part was, when I left my job, because I kind of left, I did it wrong, I showed up one day, I just handed him the keys and was like, I'm out, I didn't give him 2 weeks. I did it wrong, that's the wrong thing to do. But, when I looked at how much I made,
you know, in the first year of an artist, it was twice as much that I made in a job. But a lot of times we stay in these positions, we stay at these places because we think, like we're afraid, like, to utilize our talents against, we're afraid that we're not going to be able to make it, or we might fail. Well, I mean, shoot, go for it, you know what I'm saying? Especially now, you know what I'm saying? Because the pays is going to get less. You don't even get health care no more most of the times, you know what I'm saying? So the best thing to do is utilize your talents to give. So I consider myself a success, and like I said, I'm thankful I had, you know, artists like these to go out in front of me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of times, I feel like I wouldn't have had the success that I have if it wasn't an Immortal Technique as a part, like really paving the role of conscious hip hop, you know what I'm saying? Coming before me, Invincible coming before me. You know, this brother just opened up a store, right?
We opened up, yeah. We got a store in Blika and Lafayette.
So, I mean, come on, man. Like, I mean, that's success right now. This is New York, he opened the store, right? Come on now.
And it's real hip hop.
Real hip hop.
We have to wrap up the panel discussion here to have time for some questions. So, do people from the audience would like to ask some questions? Yes, and also to have time for some performances as well. So. Oh.
Hi. My question is probably mostly for Invincible, but if other people want to answer, it's fine. But it's about women and gender and hip hop and politics. So I remember after the police who beat Rodney King were not found guilty of any crimes, Sister Souljah was very outspoken with criticizing the justice system in the U.S. and police brutality and some other things. And at the time, it was an election year. And Bill Clinton called her reverse racist and compared her to David Duke and essentially ruined her entire career. And in my memory, that's the last time I can remember a female rapper having the access to sort of the limelight in that way to be political. But it seemed like the consequences she suffered for being political were a lot more severe than the consequences that male rappers suffer for being political. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit.
That's a really interesting observation. I think in general, I see so many, again, maybe because I live in a parallel universe, but I see so many outspoken women hip-hop artists that really put themselves on the line so often that it's almost like we become unaffected in a way, because in a way, this is the distinction I'm making, and my perspective is kind of skewed because I'm not interested in a mainstream level of success, right? So I don't know where Sister Souljah is now, but to my knowledge, she's probably been able to carve a whole nother path for herself as a result of being so marginalized by that mainstream, political, just that whole realm. And so, like Bahamadia calls it the scenic route. Like, you may not be able to take the regular path, but you take the scenic route, and that's actually more aligned with your values, more aligned with, your vision for the world. And when I think about like DJ Cutting Candy, who's a dear friend of mine in Techniques, who recently just had some major health issues that we're now fundraising for, actually doing a benefit for at Joe's Pub May 16th. Cutting Candy is one of like the greatest inspirations and examples for me of a hip hop artist. She's an incredible DJ and turntablist and poet, but also like a hardcore community organizer who was always outspoken, who was never held back what her thoughts are on any situation, from what's happened, colonization in the Philippines to situations here in New York, working with Reach Hip Hop to speak out against what High 97 has been doing, just all across the board. She's always represented all those realms. Now, as far as the marginalization and the ostracization, 1,000%. You know what I'm saying? Like I've definitely experienced that personally, in the sense that I turned down a lot of record deals. I turned down a lot of opportunities. every time something comes to me that's not aligned with my values, I say no. But every time I say no, it creates a new yes. Because what I'm saying yes to is to my community. I'm saying yes to being accountable as an artist. I'm saying yes to the possibility of something other than the bullshit that we're supposed to settle for. And so I guess I'm agreeing with you, but I'm also viewing it as a strength that the way that we've been pushed out has been a way for us to leave the current system and start to really imagine the possibilities for something new and new definitions of success.
If I could just,
Please.
If I could just answer the young lady's question on a different scale than she said, another dimension of it. Really, that's a very interesting thing you brought up. And it's also much more related, not just to women's issue, but to the right-left issue. This is a classic case of the left being forced to attack the extreme version of what they saw as their own party. Clinton became famous for this afterwards because...
Just to clarify, I wrote a dissertation on it.
Oh, okay.
So.
No, I'm for everybody else, not for you. But I think that the whole point of it was that this Clinton tactic is now used for conservatives, for all people that see the only way to define themselves and to strengthen themselves among moderates is to attack the most extreme version of what people think you are. So if people associated Democrats with the black power base, because definitely African American people vote Democrat, yeah, 95% of the time. And when you hear Republican rhetoric, it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't. I think that what's interesting about it is that this is a classic case of not only being able to lash out at somebody without having the severe consequences then be put back towards that person. In other words, if Sister Souljah had found a way of having a media base, or had been perhaps embraced more by the hip-hop media base at the time, and said, well, Mr. Clinton, let's examine your issues with misogyny right now. I mean, I don't know if we would have caught him in the same exact scenario that he put himself in later, but most certainly I think there would have been questions raised that were very interesting to hear to people when you talk about criticizing, someone from your own extreme wing of whatever party you're affiliated with.
We're wondering if we could take a few questions at once and then have the panelists answer. We really would like some level of performance at the end.
You had no idea.
Well, hello. I'm very glad to be here. I always like to see the youth in their conferences. Like, let me tell you something. I went to Columbia University one time, and they had some scholars critiquing 50 Cent's hip-hop Bible. I want to know what your opinion is.
His hip-hop Bible? I never read his version of the Testament, but...
I want to first say I'm really pleased at what I'm hearing around how much you guys have been well aware of just like content versus form, and how the form of hip-hop has been very much under attack and forces of co-option and all those things. And I had in mind that I was going to ask a question around it, and just to hear how aware and kind of on the front lines of those questions you guys are is really inspiring, actually. I want to go back to the point that was made about the good old days, and how I feel a little wary of history repeating itself, to Immortal Technique's point about civil rights dropping the ball, and how people like Ice Cube and Eazy-E were making, in fact, quite profound music, if not vulgar and full of problems. It was still profound, and it was still masterful. And I feel like as each year passes and we get older, our sensitivity changes. I'm now a father too. I'm getting into the end of my 20s. I have 2 kids. My sensitivity is different. I receive music differently. You know, I'm from LA. When I see Rick Ross using the name Rick Ross, it offends me. Yeah, I know what that means. I see a rapper sponsored by corporations co-opting the name of a drug dealer sponsored by war criminals. That's like double whammy of just despair, and it makes me very angry. But I have to check. I constantly want to try to check my own righteous indignation about that and not create my own disconnect between me and the generation coming after me. And those questions of how we reach people and knowing the communities we come from and seeing my brother who's of that generation, 22 years old now with a felony, having just got out of jail, like, I can't simply just judge, even though I want to, and even though I feel feelings of judgment, because I hear all that stuff, and I feel like I know what it means. I feel like I know, I have a sensitivity to deconstruct internally why a rapper being named Freeway or being named Rick Ross, or Rick Ross making a song about Larry Hoover being offensive. And that's scratching the surface. I mean, we could talk about misogyny, we can talk about exploitation of violence, and so on and so forth. But I'm at a place where I receive that in a way that it's very easy for me to become indignant and judgmental of the younger generation, who's receiving it differently. And in many cases, receiving it ahistorically, which indicates a failure of responsibility around education, right? So,
you can wrap up the question.
Yes, I'm sorry. So that is my question. How are we being wary of that? Every year we're getting a little bit older, and there's a new generation that's receiving mass culture that's got a lot of power behind it, that has a lot of destructive messages. You guys are also artists practicing a form that is seen as being associated with young people. How do we work on that disconnect and also check our own indignation and judgment?
Thank you. And we'll take one more question and then come back to the panelists.
Hello, my name is Josette. I really want to thank you all for being here. This is really tall. I just especially want to thank Sen-One and Immortal, because I've actually studied you guys in my hip-hop class in my university, and it's amazing to meet you. Okay, my question, yeah, I'm kind of fangirling. Okay, my question is, I find that I love your work, and it's especially visual. I'm a visual artist, so I really especially love your work. And one thing I find is that when I try to approach these issues such as misogyny or gentrification, all these things that make me really impassioned, I get really, really depressed because I'm around it all the time, all these images. I get really hopeless at some points, and I was wondering, how do you guys manage that, and how do you keep yourselves afloat and sane while also dealing with these issues on a daily basis? That's my question.
Well, I think it was touched earlier. What Immortal was saying was that I don't think we should get consumed so much in what the outside is doing. I think what we need to do is focus on what our missions are and what makes us feel good. I mean, the brain responds to pleasure. That's one of the most powerful avenues the brain looks for. So hip hop to us brought us pleasure. So I think really especially with visual can mean, it's just like lyrics. I mean, visual paints, we paint pictures, but what we paint is not always what people see. You know what I mean? It's what you interpret. So it's what you take in from it. And that's the way it is with this culture or with life, I think. It's like, it depends on what you're gonna focus on. And I think that was touched on here today. If the negativity is gonna take most of your energy, then that's gonna cause a problem. You know what I mean? There's a yin and yang for a purpose. There's a balance in everything. So I think it's good to address what's negative in anything, but you have to always keep it even and balanced with the positiveness, you know what I mean? And that's what I kind of like try to give from the historical aspect of how bad things were. There was also that good times, the people from that era will tell you that. We had a tremendous good time under poverty. I had more of a good time under being in those bad conditions of the 70s than I do now. My kids do not enjoy life the way I enjoyed life. I did 1,000, at the age of 15, I did maybe 100 years of things that they never even thought about doing, you know what I mean? And I think, and I think that's really where it's at. It's like, don't get stuck in with basically having chains on yourself, it's mental chains. Don't so much get stuck on that. Get more stuck on what you want to accomplish, what changes you want to make, what you'd rather see. And you know what? Let your art speak from that avenue and let that move forward. You know what I mean? That's the way I would, answer the question. I hope I answered it.
I gotta amen that, man. Kids don't even have toys these days, you know what I mean? I remember I lined all them G.I. Joes up to fight one another, and they had I stole my sister's little pony to put the nigga on, but now they just have everything on a computer. So, yeah, but there was something about that danger of back in the day. Not to say that it was better, because people died over stupid things like shoes that don't even make you jump higher; they just make the top of the sneaker squeeze tighter. To talk about the young lady who was talking about how not to feel frustration, Josette, I think the issue for me is always don't necessarily, always stay focused on a big picture somewhere, but at the same time, if that's what you're dealing with all the time, then things are going to seem impossible. If you focus on one specific cause that you're going to dedicate yourself to 100% at that particular time, then that becomes possible as well. There's a global pandemic of people that are homeless and dying and orphaned by war. I focused on one specific region for the campaign in Afghanistan to build one orphanage that would house 20 to 25 children. That was the mission, and as long as I was focused on that, that's what happened. We went down to Haiti with Hip Hop for Haiti and Arms Around Haiti, and we just focused on one specific area where we were going to help and rebuild homes. It wasn't like I thought in my head, I have to solve all this. You don't have to solve all this. At some level, you have to accept the fact that you can't do everything, but that if you can dedicate part of your time, then it becomes a lot easier, and you are focused on one singular thing as opposed to everything. And the young man who was discussing Rick Ross, you can find the imagery, or you can find people using the names of things throughout the history of hip hop. It's not just privy to discussions we can have now about it. In the past, and this is no disrespect. When I first heard the Rough Riders, I remember reading about them in history books. The Rough Riders were Teddy Roosevelt's black soldiers that weren't given the same uniforms or rights as white soldiers, but they fought all of his conquests in Central America. They were the vanguard, which means they were at the front lines. Black soldiers fighting other black and indigenous people for the U.S.'s control of every country that exists in Central America. That was his expansionist policy, much more so than George Bush could ever possibly hope to imagine. I think when you look at it from that level, we can take anybody's name or what anybody does. I think what we need to do in order to not be judgmental and to not be frustrated is to take the most amount of power where it does matter in your life. To say to your child when they grow up, you don't have to worry about other people's children. You're your children's father. You say to them, hey man, do you know who the real Ricky Ross is? This is what he used to do. He used to sell crack. Where did he get it from? There was this thing called the Iran-Contra scandal that played a part in all of this. At that point, when you teach with that authority, but also with love, rather than saying, oh, this is a real dude, this is a fraud. At some point, everybody's real and everyone's a fraud. People have different hypocrisies about them. We're all human beings. True. So I think when you confront it from that level and you can educate him, then you're circumventing whatever they're going to do. You know what I mean? The only thing is the problem becomes when the family member or the father isn't there as much as the television is there. So as long as you're there more than the TV to reinforce the positive stereotypes rather than the negative caricature they're always going to get from movies or whatever, then I think you're doing more than your job, brother.
Yeah, and I just wanted to speak to that too. One of the things we did in Pittsburgh is we started what we called the One Hood Media Academy. And what we did was Pittsburgh, they did a study about how African-American men are portrayed in the media locally in Pittsburgh, and they found that 96% of the times that African-American men are portrayed in the media is crime or sports. So one of the things we did was first we began to talk about, just like you said, artists like Rick Ross or the hip hop industry, and we began to teach really media literacy. I think that, we looked at it and said like, well, how does it, I think just like you said, I think judgmental is like seeing a 17 or 18-year-old that's trying to make it out of the hood, that's in a bad condition, that want money, that want wealth, that want fame, and kind of judging them, sort of like what Tech said, instead of like reaching out and educating them. So how do we make the new generation of conscious artists, the new generation of artists that are going to, have that context of history? They're not just going to fall out the sky. If we're people that understand that and have that knowledge, then it's our responsibility to share it.
So we started this academy for African American boys, not only to teach them about media literacy or how to decipher these constant, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they're constantly being world star hip hop. They're being bombarded, so to teach them about that, but we also began to teach them how to create their own media. To say to them, like, if you don't feel like you're being represented properly on BET, on MTV, on World Star Hip Hop, here's a camera, here's an editing program, here's how you upload it, here's how you blog, you know what I'm saying? Because, that's what it is now. Really, you can become a media creator yourself and you can put out your representation. So if the mainstream media didn't cover the Mumia protest, there was about 50, 60 cameras there and people edited, chopped it up, put it online, and those of us can share. If you weren't there, this is what you missed. This is the live stream. This is where we're at as media creators today. So if we wanted to take it, it starts in the home. It starts with your own home and your family. But I think also, we can begin to have those conversations. You can open your living room up. Invite people over and cook a meal and say, hey, man, let's watch The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Y'all familiar with that movie? Do y'all know what it means? Because young people might not know. Nah, what's that, man? Oh, it's real ill, man. We're going to, chop it up and talk about it. We can begin to do those things. So we can begin to teach young people how to be better media analyzers, because these corporations want their mind so they can become, consumers for life. Slaves for life to these products, and so if we have the ability and knowledge to understand, like you said, who the real Rick Ross is and his history, then let's share that,
I'm the real 50 Cent. Don't
real
forget,
50 Cent too.
There's a real 50 Cent. And this 50 Cent don't match up with that 50 Cent. Just because I lived it.
And none of us have read his Bible. Sorry, we can't answer that one.
That's a good thing.
But I just wanted to kind of follow up, agree with, and add to what y'all said. First of all, with the question around working with youth and that disconnect, and to restrain that judgment that we want to have over what they're listening to or what they're interested in. For me, it's really about authentic relationship. Having like a real relationship with yourself and with the young people in your life. And at that moment, it doesn't necessarily matter as much what they're consuming, what they're listening to, because there's a whole nother conversation you're able to have. And like you just mentioned, everything is a conversation starter. Everything is a learning opportunity. To say, okay, here's a learning moment, and let me break this down for you, but let me ask you the questions that are gonna make you break it down for yourself. True. And ultimately, to be able to, similar to what Jasiri was just saying, give them the tools to know how they're able to create themselves, and to have a more clear understanding of their own voice. Because there are so many ideas and information and images that are being hurled at all of us, and specifically with the internet, it's times a billion. So it's just important for us to be able to be centered and find our own voice in the midst of that. And when we support the youth in our lives and just one another all the time, we're bombarded and sensory overloaded. So how do we find that sense of peace, that sense of having your own voice and intuition stronger than those outside messages? And that's to me what it comes down to, rather than censorship. It's almost like I'd rather have you exposed to all of it and then be able to find your voice within it. And then in response to Giselle, that was your question. I feel first of all, I feel you. It's so overwhelming. There's so much work to be done. But one of my deepest values that I hold on to is the importance of small scale work. As opposed to thinking about everything as masses and numbers and how we can get the most possible people to agree to one slogan and be a one rally. I feel like that's a really linear approach to creating change, as opposed to really thinking about, what can I do in my life to transform myself? What can I do to transform my relationship to the people immediately around me, the people on my block, the people who are interested in the same passions as I have, and how can we really start from that place. And I feel like when there's interconnectedness amongst different communities that may only be reaching an inch wide but are going a mile deep, that's way more valuable than having projects that are a mile wide and only go an inch deep. And that's why we really need to focus and value those small-scale projects. Like with the work that I do with Detroit Future Youth Network, almost all the youth programs in the network work with like 10 youth or less. And typically they wouldn't be getting funded by most foundations because those foundations are looking for outcomes and really measurable outcomes that are defined by numbers. But a lot of those things that we do of transforming one another's lives can't necessarily be measured in that kind of way. And so then we neglect doing it because we feel like we can't prove it. But that's like, with newer science, like subparticle level of measurement, like they're just now finally coming up with tools to see that. And on a smaller scale, things operate in a whole nother level than what we would expect and what we see on a larger scale. And we really need to begin to take more time and take more energy in supporting those kind of initiatives, because in my opinion, they're way more effective. And when we're interconnected amongst them, like seemingly disconnected things can then emerge into a whole paradigm shift and a whole quantum leap of a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of living and being in community with one another. So that's where to start.
We have time for performances, a little bit of time, so okay, like a few minutes.
What's up? None of us were asking.
She said
May 16th, Joe's Pub is my next show locally. If anybody wants to come out, it's a benefit for DJ Cutting Candy. And it's going to be a women in hip-hop showcase being organized by Toshi Regan.
Okay.
May 16th at Joe's Pub. You got any upcoming shows?
May 1st, I'll be at Union Square with Das Racist and Tom Morillo for the Occupy thing. Please come by. Free show. We'll be giving away free copies of the Martyr, and I'll be talking to anybody there. Thank you very much. What time? I think it starts at 12 o'clock, from 12 to 5:30. Thank you.
So what's the state of the black world when the hood raised black boys and black girls? Before you pass judgment on us, Jasiri X gonna give you something to discuss. See, these streets will talk to you if you understand the language. Corners become famous, the more blood they stain with, the more murals painted when shells hit the pavement. We need 3 Jesuses to come and save this. We need Moses, Abraham, and David, all 12 disciples, to wash away the blood on that hand that held the rifle. Cause life's so hard, he like whoever show they face tonight is getting robbed when your home is a grave. The streets is a maze and so many cats blaze, it's hard to see through the haze. And crime pays way more than minimum wage, and plus the lead from the gate will take a swim in your waves, loosen your braids, leave bald spots in your fade, like you got your hair cut with some raggedy blades. The truth is, we no better off than women with slaves. Malcolm X and Dr. King probably spinning their graves. It's gotta be the last day since I can't take no more. And these kids, they don't Harlem Shake no more. They in the kitchen, cooking up cakes galore, kicking down doors like everybody face the floor. And they got guns that will make you shake and contort. And they don't shoot ball, they shoot 38s for sport. Getting tried as adults when they case hit the court. Getting sent to state prison, getting raped, oh Lord. What did we do to deserve this condition where we can't even function with our herb in our system? And every hit we take from the split blurs our vision, and the next day just means another murder victim in the summer. Just means we gonna get dumber, coroners putting bodies under covers. And in between sheets like the Ozzy brothers, he told his mother that he loved the hood, but the hood will never love you. See, what's the state of the black world when the hood raised black boys and black girls? Before you pass judgment on us, Jasiri X gonna give you something to discuss. All right. So I do have some DVDs if y'all want to cop some Jasiri X that you can take home with you. You know, support real hip hop. And I'll give the mic to one of the baddest MCs I've ever seen. Touch it. Invincible. Give it up, y'all.
Close your eyes. Imagine the future. Close your eyes. Imagine the ideal world you hope to find. When you open them up, all you see is struggle, foes, and lies. Spend our energy to mobilize, oppose and fight the enemy, but don't propose a wiser way to go. It's no surprise. I can't rap at a podium. This road of life, all reactionary is to slow the mind. Instead of breathe with open minds. Listen, we keep our passion under wraps and hold it in until our lungs collapse. Got starving souls with hunger cramps. I walk with no disguise. Learn from both the lows and highs. Type of knowledge you can't go to buy. Kind of feeling you can't codify. Won't turn into a franchise. I customize and localize. Deepen in relationships. Build it from the bottom up. The goal's to rise. Say the head that wears the crown is heavy but still hold it high. Bears a bigger burden so your shoulders wide. But instead of charismatic leaders in the big lights, we assist the birthing of a movement that's emerging. Be the midwife. Emergence. We on the verge of an earth shift while you searching for purpose. Parallel universes is bursting. At first you can't tell on the surface. Emergence. Thank you.
Guess one of us do it, we all gotta do it, huh? Shit, Jasiri, come on, man. I was almost out the room. All right, this piece is called Toast to the Dead. Here's a toast to the dead. If you don't drink, smoke to the head. For the freedom fighters killed by the feds. For those who died hard in the streets, soaking in red, and died slow asleep in a dream, choking in bed. Here's a toast to the dead. For my enemies that are gone. I'm not a coward, so celebrating that would be wrong. I pray to God that your soul will come back again, so I can see you in the next life and finish it then. A toast to the dead for criminals burning in hell. I wonder how many presidents are burning as well. Emperors, popes, senators, generals, amputees feeling lucky until they see the vegetables. A toast to the dead for those who are forgotten, written out of history by the corrupted and rotten. Black saints whitewashed during La Reconquista. Thousands of Indios, Spaniards used to conquer the Incas. Fuck a moment of silence, I need a moment of violence. Like the 19th century Caribbean islands. Long live those who came before that paved the way for me. The warriors and scientists that came before slavery. And if that last lyric was predictable, take that clairvoyance and apply it to your life. In the physical, presumptuous, half-hearted homunculus. Self-destruction is the power without knowing what the function is. A toast to the dead for all of my fam. I will never let an idea die with a man. My rhymes are like NASCAR lines designed to give a view of this. J Dilla's still alive as long as his music is. Toast to the dead for rap legends and pioneers. Your legacy won't be forsaken as long as I am here. Knowledge of the past and wisdom of the present I teach and leave in the hands of a worthy lieutenant. A toast to the dead for children with cancer and AIDS. A cure exists and you probably could have been saved. Sad to see medicine, divorce, morality, corporate home wreckers pimping up a salary. A toast to the dead for those that have died today. The victims and those exonerated by DNA. The only thing worse than giving freedom to the guilty is killing the innocent and leaving your soul filthy. Immortal Technique, remember me when I'm gone. I encrypted my lyrics to stay alive in a song, so you always keep a piece of my spirit inside when you struggle to complete what I started before I died. But some of you won't survive the changes the earth makes, swallowed by tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes. And that's just the first stage. If you cannot reverse ways and realize that we are one regardless of our birthplace. Peace.